Welcome back to a brand new week of episodes here at Primility Primer, our morning reminder about the impact of balancing our pride and humility as we go about our daily lives. This is episode 15. I am your host, Jared Morris. Very excited to be beginning this new week of Primility Primer, and I'm filled with all kinds of enthusiasm and ideas and just zest, I guess you could say. It's kind of a weird word, but kind of fits. I just got back from Podcast Movement 2015, which was held here in Dallas. And there was so much that I learned, and not just about podcasting, but just different ways to actually view what we're talking about here at Primility from a lot of the keynote speakers, from a lot of the individual people that I had the great privilege of talking to. And so over the course of this week and probably into the future, I'll be distilling some of those ideas to you. And don't worry, I know that not everybody, in fact, not most people who watch this show, consume this content, are into the craft of podcasting. And so I'm not going to be talking about that. But I think there are a lot of ways to distill the ideas that I learned and was enthused by into the general concepts that we're talking about here. And what I want to talk about this morning is an example of that, because the conference actually opened up with, I thought, just a description of the essence of Primility by one of the keynote speakers. And that speaker was Roman Mars, who hosts the show 99% Invisible, which is a terrific show, one of the most well-produced and well-crafted shows out there. And what Roman was talking about was how to turn podcasting into a living, how to make a living doing it, how to make it your job. And one of the big ideas that he talked about was serve your audience, which is an idea that those of us who create content for a living hear all of the time: serve your audience. But the way he explained it was different than I'd heard other people explain it, because he made specific mention of the fact that you have to serve your audience, but also realize that you are a part of your audience. And in a way, you have to serve yourself too, maybe even serve yourself first, because at a certain level and in reality, you may not get anything out of the experience of creating this content or creating whatever it is you're creating. You may not get anything out of it other than your own satisfaction at having done something well. The value that you get, the pride that you get in producing something worthwhile. And you have to do that for yourself first. And in doing that, you will hopefully produce something that is high quality that then other people will find value in. And that to me really is the essence of Primility, because it does require humility to serve an audience and care about an audience, and to understand that what you're doing, what you're creating, is part of something bigger, that it means something to other people. Focus on what it can mean to other people, but at the same time, balance that with simply an internal pride for what you're doing, for doing the best job that you can, for putting your best foot forward. And that really is Primility, that balance right there. And that's such great advice for a podcaster, for anybody who's creating content. But if we expand that, it's great advice for all of us, because all Roman was really teaching the people who were listening to his keynote at Podcast Movement is, how do you build a better relationship with an audience? Well, you serve them with high quality content, with something that is produced very well. And the way that you do that is to take pride in what you're creating, focus on the audience as you're doing it, and you'll find that intersection. But it's about building that relationship with an audience. Well, building relationships is the essence of life, the essence of what we do on a daily basis, the essence of what makes life worth living. And we build relationships over time through simple acts that build up, that compound over time to create trust, to create a certain level of expectation. And these relationships build. And I think there is both an element of pride and an element of humility that we really need to understand and focus on to really build meaningful long-term relationships. Because obviously, to build a meaningful relationship with a person, there's an element of humility required. I have to care about you. I have to do things for you. My actions have to mean something to you, and vice versa, for that relationship to build. And all of the best friendships and family relationships and just any type of relationships, I think, are built on a foundation of humility, where the people in that relationship, it's not that they think less of themselves, they just think of themselves less, right? They think of the other person and put the needs of that person first. And when you have two people putting each other's needs first, you can create this really beautiful relationship. And yet that also places a high burden on the other person to validate our actions and our beliefs. And if we're only doing it to build this meaningful relationship and to get a certain reaction from another person, well, that can be an issue if we're not getting that. Because then does that mean that if we are acting in this certain way and acting with humility and thinking these thoughts, that they don't mean anything because we don't get the reaction that we want? No, I don't think so. I think there needs to be an internal pride that we have to simply do the right thing, to think the right thing, to put other people first, even if it doesn't result in the reaction from them that we want. Putting other people first, putting people first in relationships simply because it's the right thing to do, and taking pride in that, and having a certain sense of pride simply in our actions and what we're doing, independent of the reaction that we get from other people. Now, of course, the funny thing happens when you do that, I think, is you're more likely to get the reaction that you want out of other people. Just like when we talk about building an audience, when you do this, when you simply serve an audience selflessly because you love the content and you're taking pride in what you're doing, and you don't necessarily need the validation of the audience to do what you're doing, a lot of times you'll get the validation of the audience. So these things really work together, but I think sometimes we get so caught up in doing it and needing the actions validated by the reaction of other people that we forget, you know what, I can take pride in just doing the right thing, doing this because it's the right thing to do, putting this out there, and knowing, having trust, having faith that the reciprocation will happen, but not needing it to be validated internally for what we're doing. And Roman's talk at Podcasting, it really made me think about that. And I actually wrote about it in this morning's One Thing newsletter, which if you go to primility.com/join, you can get. I send a newsletter out every Monday morning, a positive thought to get everyone's week started off on the right foot. And then, of course, the Friday digest, so you can keep up with the elements of Primility Primer. But what I talked about here was a more expanded version of what I wrote about in the newsletter that comes out later today. So I hope it's an idea that you take to heart, that means something to you. And if there's any challenge to take from this, it's simply to really pay attention today, this week, to how you're interacting with other people, and take pride in simply putting them first and doing the right thing and doing right by them without requiring that reciprocation, without requiring validation from anybody else. Just that internal pride that what you're doing is right, and over the long term is the key to building the relationships that make life meaningful. Thank you very much for watching, for listening to this episode of Primility Primer. I always appreciate it. We go live at 6:30 Central every weekday, and then, of course, you can listen on the podcast. And we hope that you will continue to join us. And again, primility.com/join. That will get you onto the email list. It will get you the Monday newsletter, the Friday digest, and you can get your red Primility wristband. All you have to do, there's a link in the email that you'll get. All you have to do is fill out the form, and I will be happy to send one to you. Have a great day. Stay cognizant of your pride and your humility. Keep them as balanced as you can. We'll be right back here to talk to you tomorrow. Wrist bump.